let's welcome Renee.
He started the waterworks. Hi, everybody. I'm Renee, and I'm an alcoholic. My sponsor, my sobriety date is March 21st, 1992. Todd M. is my sponsor and I'm his favorite. Cheryl R. is my sponsor. She's located down in Florida. And my home group is the Three Legacies group in Lebanon, Tennessee. He's laughing because I'm usually not funny. My husband is, hey, it might be a funny talk. I'm the serious one in the house because this thing is serious. It's life or death, right? Three Legacies group in Lebanon, Tennessee. We meet on Thursday nights at 7:30. And that is a direct result of creating the fellowship you crave. You know, when you move from a state that you've been sober 20 years in, or actually almost 30. I celebrated my 30th sobriety anniversary at a new place with new people and new groups. And I was a fish out of water. And we moved out from the Nashville area. We had rented for about 6 months, and we ended up in a town called Lebanon, Tennessee. And we needed a place to call home. And if you don't have it there, you create it. And if you've never been a part of creating a home group, it's an experience you don't want to miss. So hold on. It will skyrocket your program. I just wanted to start out. I've never done this before, but I wanted to explain to you where my life is today, a little snapshot. I'm going to go all the way through, but sometimes we start talking about all these things and we forget what we're doing right now, but just a little snapshot of where this story is going to go. Last Friday, my sponsor arrived into Nashville, and I got to spend Friday and Saturday with her and her husband and a bunch of AAs. We have a AA house. It's God's house, actually, so AAs are in and out all the time, and we got to host and bring some connection together for people to meet, some lineage and some friends of ours. Hopped on a plane on Sunday to go to Maryland to take my stepmom to a brain surgery that she needed an aneurysm repair. And that was a direct result of when my father died almost 3 years ago. My husband and I promised him that we would take care of her and make sure she was okay. And I got to do that for the last 4 or 5 days. And then I come back to Tennessee and got to see my granddaughter for the morning. Then I went over to the nursing home and I checked on my mother-in-law, who I'm the caretaker of. And I usually am in that nursing home 2 to 3 times a day. Got to see some sponsees, got to do a fifth step. Then I got to get in my car yesterday and come to be with you. I can't do that if I'm drinking. I can't do that if I'm not connected to a higher power. I'm exhausted by 10 o'clock if I haven't plugged into a power greater than myself. So that I needed to get out of the way, this just so I don't forget to tell you how big and huge my life is because of AA and all the things I get to do for him. So I want to thank Cheryl for asking me. I want to thank this committee. I want to thank all the treatment center people that I see here and all my friends that have driven from Tennessee to be here. And Josh, your talk last night, you hit it right off the head with me, because it's like when I hear someone from the podium say they came from a beautiful, loving family of 2 parents and had everything they could have possibly needed and they still end up here. I need to hear that. This disease is a great leveler. It doesn't care what we came from. It doesn't care if you were brought up by a single alcoholic mother like I was. It doesn't care if you're educated or not, if there's money in your bank account. If you ate out of dumpsters, that's one thing we have in common. Well, I didn't eat out of the dumpsters. I slept behind them. I'd rather just not eat. Got in the way of the alcohol. But I'd wake up behind them, and I'll get to that too. But I just love to hear it. It's like you always get my attention, because tell me about that black hole stuff. Tell me about that spiritual sickness that we all share. Tell me how you wanted to stop and you couldn't. Those things in the crevices that keep you up at night and feel that shame and guilt and remorse. Once you take that alcohol away, we got to do something with it. It's got to go somewhere. So I started by saying, I was raised by a disco, alcoholic, 80s mom, working 2 and 3 jobs. do have a memory of my first childhood memory was the night my father left. I was in about second grade. I had a 1-year-old brother. My father was crying, so it was pretty evident that he didn't want to leave. I've later found out that he didn't want to leave. My mom just didn't want to be married anymore, and she had decided that, after 12 years, she wanted to have a life without a husband and make a run of it. And that's when her alcoholism took off. So I was raised in a place where it was never safe. At night when, we had to go to bed to get ready for school the next day and stuff, the disco music was blasting and there was, partying going on downstairs. And to this day, I need the house real quiet at night. I just like it quiet at night. These are some of the things that I just remember. I remember being scared. I remember feeling sad. I miss my dad. I went there every weekend. It wasn't every other weekend. He came every weekend. He had no idea what was going on in that house. And then, what happens is, we lived in a neighborhood that was on like the other side of the train tracks. It was, you opened up the cupboards and kind of moved from the roaches, and you got the cereal box and you looked and you hoped that there wasn't something in there because you really needed to eat something. And that's, just the circumstances. It wasn't why I found alcohol to fix some of these things. It was just the way it was. And when I started drinking, my mom now had a drinking buddy. So there were some fun times. I love music. I love to dance. I love some of the things that we did do together, but it stopped. It wasn't fun at the end. So anyway, there were some things that happened in that neighborhood that I didn't have the knowledge, the words, anything to understand what was happening, things that shouldn't happen to kids. And back then they didn't have sexual offenders list, or, people didn't go to therapy, or, you just didn't do those things back then. And so I walked around with that stuff deep down inside, and it started to go down and go down. And the alcohol kept it down for a long time. I started drinking when I was in 6th grade. And I found the elixir. I found the thing that quieted the soul enough for me to go out there and try to live like the other kids were living. And I found myself already in that age in some situations that were dark. Hanging out with a lot of older people. I lived near Washington, D.C. I lived in a town called Rockville, and I could get down to D.C. easily. Down there, it was 18 for the legal drinking age, and so I spent a lot of time going back and forth from Washington, D.C. to Maryland when I was in middle school and high school. So there was a part of D.C. back then, it was the southeast, and it was really not the place for a girl like me to be hanging out, but my disease gives me my people, and that's where my people were. And the problem was when I was hanging out down there, by the end of the night, people were already left the city, but I was still there, and so I would have to find a place to hang out until I could figure out how to get back. So it was Josh's time, no cell phone, so there was no one you could just call, and there was pay phones, but you didn't have any money left and things like that. So I would be stuck there, and I would come to in alleyways, behind bushes, in really pretty bad situations. And so by the time I got home, I had a mother that, wasn't tracking me on the phone. There was no curfews, there was no 365 or whatever you keep track of your kids now. And I don't know what she thought, but I had been gone for a few days. So the fact that I graduated from high school is actually a miracle. I don't know how that happened, but the lifestyle that I was living was as an adult. And I graduated from high school, and I found myself in a little town in Southwest Virginia, at a university called Radford. And the only reason why I ended up there was because the school that I went to was on the other side of the train tracks where all the rich kids went, and I had ended up there, and they went to college. And they were filling out applications and doing all that. And my father did say, he was successful in the retail business. And he said, look, if you want to go, I'll pay for it, but I don't know how to do it. No one had ever been in college in my family. So I ended up down there in this little town in the Appalachian Mountains. And I found my people. So I went from Washington, D.C. people in southeast D.C. to little Appalachian Mountain town where they drank moonshine and hung out in the woods and had no teeth and were really, really poor. The Appalachian Mountain people really have it hard. So I stumbled into the woods from this university, and I'd hang out with them, and I'd go to class. And I love the part of our disease when it talks about, the great leveler, right? I was a biochemistry major, if you can believe this. You can't make it up, right? My brain just loves that stuff, and I wanted to be a doctor, okay? Now I'm missing days at a time. I'm down in the woods some 2 days, and then I'm up at the physiology anatomy lab with a cadaver. I mean, you can't make that up. And I'm really good at what I do. And, in between the blackouts. And I mean, I was so sick at that time. I've been drinking for so long, and my tolerance was so high. I have that Irish Catholic blood that has a very high tolerance. And most people would be, getting stomach pumps or, I guess the Narcan wasn't even a thing, when I was doing all the things I needed to do to get through those laboratories. So I had to add some things to the alcohol so I could stop shaking enough and get through the classes. And I look at my transcript today, and there's a lot of things on there that I don't even remember. I don't even remember that I took the class. It was a blur. And by the grace of God, I graduated from that university, and He's all powerful. I can promise you that. So anyway, come around my junior year, and it's getting really bad. I'm bringing in a little tape recorder to tape record the classes because I can't stay in a class and not shake and throw up and have to come running in and out. And I'm DT, and I'm really in bad shape physically. And there was a beautiful angel in my life. Her name was Hope. She was from a little town in South Boston, and she just had this love for me. I'll never forget it. And for some reason, I could feel it. There was a lot of people in my life that probably loved me back then, but I felt unlovable, and I was dirty and shameful and remorseful, and the places this disease was taking me was getting darker and darker. My moral compass was gone. I wasn't dressing appropriately, I wasn't talking appropriately, and I was doing a lot of things that I had a hard time living with if I wasn't under the influence. And Hope loved me, and I loved that was her name. But come to find out later on when I got sober, it was really because her father had been the town drunk. And she loved her father. And she knew it wasn't because he was a bad person. And she knew the way I was acting and the things that I was ending up being a part of weren't because I was a bad person. And she loved me, and I'll never forget that. She died when I was 30 of a brain aneurysm. And I got a chance to talk to her the week before she died. It was divinely inspired, that conversation, and I carry that with me for the rest of my life. That unconditional love, just loving you because deep down inside she saw something in me. And I believe that's part of the reason why I'm supposed to give it back. And she wasn't even in AA, but she taught me how to love like that. So, I end up, there was a guy that got sober when I was in college. He had been someone I had drank with in junior high school. He was older than me. And he had 2 different Camaros. He had a red one and a white one. And my girlfriend and I used to get him really wasted, and we were like 14 and drive these Camaros around the Washington Metropolitan Beltway, right? And so anyway, I knew he drank like us, but he had gotten in some trouble, and he ended up, thank you. I'm not a seasoned speaker. I don't know when to stop and drink and pause and all that stuff. Like Josh, this is not my favorite thing to do. I'd rather be in the jail or taking a girl off the street and getting her cleaned up and getting her to a detox. I love to do that. I'm still glad I love to do that. Hope it never goes away. So, I knew he was sober, and I felt sorry for him. I thought, oh my God, when he got hit with that golf club at that putt-putt golf course, maybe something really messed up his brain, because he couldn't drink successfully anymore, and he got sentenced to AA, and he got sober. And he planted that seed, because I knew he drank like me. And I knew he wasn't drinking. I didn't understand what was going on. And sometimes when I would come back to Maryland from Virginia, he would say, I'm leading a meeting, would you like to go with me? Or he'd say, I'm celebrating, I would like you to go. And I always turned him down, but he never said, you really need to go. Like, your life's getting pretty bad and you're looking pretty rough and you really need to go. He never once said that. I had a great example of that in my life. And he would just say thanks or leave me some cigarettes, and he would leave, and and I just knew it was working for him. So when I was in 11th, my junior year of college, I came to out of a 2-day binge, and I couldn't do it anymore. I had left to get a newspaper, and I had liked to read the Washington Post because it just made me feel important or something. I don't know, reading this paper back then. I don't know what it was. I don't know. And I left to go get a paper, and I came back 3 days later, and my roommate had to shower me. I didn't know where I had been, and I couldn't even shower myself. And the shame and the guilt and the remorse of that day of her trying to give me a bath and clean me up is what brought me to you all. Couldn't do it one more day. I was tired of passing out and not going to sleep. I was just, when I got sober and I learned about pajamas and brushing your teeth and having like an evening routine, I hadn't done that since I had been a child. My sponsor used to give me pajamas on my anniversary. I had to learn how to go to sleep. So that's what brought me to you all. And I called the hotline because I knew that it was working for my friend. And I called the AA hotline. And my roommate at the time, her and her brother, she had a twin brother, they had this little Honda CRX or something. It was like a little compact little Honda. And it was red. I'll never forget that. And I called the hotline, and they told me there was a meeting at the psychiatric hospital in Radford, right near us. And they said, here, take our car, go. I think I had chased my roommate Tracy with a knife the weekend before in a blackout, and they were getting kind of scared. And, and she was probably tired of bathing me and finding me and all that. So I went to this AA meeting, and that was in February 17th of 1989, and that's not my sobriety date. But that was when I was separated from alcohol, and I've never had a drink since then. And I stayed in AA from 1989 to 1992, half measuring, learning what any form at all is. I often wonder if I should share that, if I should share that part, but it's important. I picked up a 1-year chip that I guess you call it dirty. I don't know what you want to call it, but I had not had a drink since that day, and I picked up a 2-year chip. And by the time that 3-year mark came around, I had graduated Radford, moved back to Maryland. I was working in an urgent care facility, running their laboratory and triaging and treating patients with an incredible internist. Man was a huge mentor in my life. I miss him still to this day. Taught me so much. And I'm working, and I'm going to AA, and I go to this AA dance at University of Maryland, and I love that Al-Anon's here because I do have some component in there too in my DNA. And I go to this AA dance, and there's this magnet thing that happens with 2 people in a big AA dance, and it happened. And me and this guy meet, and within a month we're engaged because he asked, and he had a ring. Didn't even know him, didn't understand what that meant, but it was time. I'm graduated college, I'm not drinking. I've got a great job, and I'm looking at the timeline, and I want to be a young mom. It's time to get this thing going, And this is, I believe, another spiritual malady part of my disease, right? My perception of what's going on. This man asks you to marry him, and you're ready to get married. You just say yes. I didn't even think, is he a good person? I don't know anything about him. So those are the kinds of self-will run riot stories that I have, and I have years of those. We don't have enough time this morning, but not drinking, going to AA, and that's the best I can come up with. And I run my life into the ground within a year. I walk down that aisle in a beautiful Catholic church knowing on enough benzodiazepine to put down a horse, knowing I was doing the wrong thing and not having the courage to say, wait, I made a mistake, you know? And so by the time I get back from that honeymoon, I'm pretty strung out on this other substance, which it's a benzo that my brain doesn't know it's not alcohol, right? And so it's on. And I end up, again, a guy gets me alone, and I have a surrender that saved my life. And at any form at all, I have to respect that in my disease. That can come now in a sinus medicine. I have to watch everything. So I surrender and I go into AA, and I've got some problems. You know, they're a little different than last time. You know, I'm not trying to figure out how to get rid of the Appalachian Mountain people and the moonshine. I've got like this husband that I don't know, that I have no business being married to. I stumble into an AA club, a bunch of young people created fellowship that they craved, and it was wild. You know, I got sober in a club, and I love clubs still to this day. And went in there with my scrubs from work, you know, and I'm walking in there, and it's like we've got the escort girls. They were my heroes. They had the dancers in there. They had the 18-wheeler drivers. They had the nurses, the doctors. We had a judge. We had a lawyer. We had, you know, the stay-at-home moms. And I love that the kids were here. You know, they used to do their homework underneath the table on the side. And we were smoking back then. And, you know, these kids were all in there. And they saved my life. So I walked in there and I got honest and I said, you know, I haven't had a drink in almost 3 years, and I have 2 weeks without a benzo. And they said, oh, congratulations, did you get a chip? Did you get a desire chip? And I'm like, did you not hear what I said? I'm not waking up behind dumpsters anymore. I'm not, you know, blacking out for 3 days at a time. And I didn't really say all that, but I just started crying and I got a desire chip. And so from that day, March 21st of 1992, I have chased this thing like my life depended on it. You know, I've been able to make decisions with my head, my heart, and my gut. You know, when my husband asked me to marry him, I was conscious of what that decision meant. So, you know, I had some things I had to deal with. I had to get rid of that little husband. He was short, and I don't know why I always say that. I guess because I'm married to this tall, beautiful man now who's 6'4", but he was short. I had to figure out how to get out of that situation, and then I was about 6 months sober, and I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. And so I'm six months sober, and I'm married to someone I shouldn't be married to, and I want this baby. I knew I have to leave this man, and I was scared out of my mind, and so I left. 7 months pregnant, I left. Had about a little bit over a year sober. I had cut off my mom and my dad out of my life when I married that man, because there's something about how you can't have the people around that know what's going on. You got to kind of isolate yourself a little bit. And I banged on the door, and I slept on a mattress in her house and on the floor. I brought this beautiful little girl into the world with the help of the AA women in the program. And they walked me through getting a divorce. They walked me through a custody hearing. When they say carry the message and not the mess, that's not true. These women carried me. And I've been able to carry other women since I got here. Just for a little while. But they carried me. I never went to court alone. Learned how to be a mom. Learned how to be a daughter. I had a sponsor that taught me how to breathe. I didn't know how to breathe when I got to you all. We laid on that shag carpet, we laid up and looked up at the sky, and she said, you know, we counted. I never had taken a deep breath. I didn't even know what that was. And there were some things I had to deal with. I had to get some outside help. After a round of steps, some things were coming up. You know, I hadn't eaten in about 10 days. I think I had 1 oatmeal cookie in 10 days. And a lot of caffeine, and that is, you know, it alters your mood. And she loved, and she was properly armed with the facts of our program and the book, and she took me to get some help, and started clearing out the space. That stuff that I had stuffed down that was dark, covering the the connection that I needed between my higher power and my soul so that I could go out there and be useful to him started to happen. And I wanted to stay sober long enough and for this baby that I brought into this world. And I didn't know how to do much. When I first got to you all, I had to learn how to dress. I heard a beautiful angel describe it as she had to learn to wear shorts longer than her panties. That kind of stuff. Like you could go into a McDonald's and not embarrass, the grandfather standing there with his grandkids, right? I had to learn all that. I had to learn how to sleep. I had to learn how to talk. I had to learn how to just for 1 second think about someone else beside myself. And so these steps are designed to do that. I had a sponsor that walked me through, the first 3 steps, and I had about 90 days, and she hit her husband or got in a physical fight, and this other lady was sober longer, took us all under her wing and said, come on, we got this girl needs to get her own help. You're coming with us. And she taught us, we got into the book. I've been sponsored through the book. I believe in that. And I stayed with her for 5 years. Those were the years where, I learned how to be of service to another human being. I learned how to go to the institutions. I learned how to be a friend. AA taught me how to be a friend. The longest friend I've ever had has been in AA. We got sober together, and any of the other friends I had, I don't even know anymore. I don't keep in touch. I'd never known how to be a friend. I was too selfish and self-centered, and I felt too shameful, and you all fixed that with the steps. And so I started removing that. I started holding my head up a little bit higher. I started a relationship with my father again. He had to cut me off. He had to detach, thank God. He couldn't watch me kill myself anymore. And so after a 2-year period of time, we started a new relationship. It was selfless on my part. When is it good for me to come over? When does it work for you? It wasn't about me anymore. And we had a beautiful relationship. One of the biggest gifts of my life. So what happened was I met this guy in AA. He was part of getting that club started. And I was married at the time still, and he was getting married. And, I went to his wedding, and then his marriage stopped working, I guess. I don't know what happened, but it was the typical story, AA girl meets AA boy on campus or whatever that is. And I had this little baby. She was about 6 months old. And, that second and third step had to be revisited, right? My God had to get big enough to encompass a job description of he had to watch over my daughter. She had to be God's kid. I was just going to be given a chance to be her mom for a while, but he needed to teach me. He needed to have the power for that relationship. And then this man comes in our life, and I need to make God a little bit bigger because I didn't know how to be in a healthy relationship. So that second step, I had to believe, right? God had to be able to handle my relationships. And I made that decision. I made a decision to learn how to date. Go out with a man who picked me up at the door, go out for the evening, get dropped off, and go inside and shut the door. I'd never done that before, right? I had to learn how to date. I had to learn how to respect myself enough and my daughter enough to go out on a date. And so we had to have some help. We weren't really good at it, but we learned how to do it. And we learned how to bring God in the middle of our marriage, our relationship. We dated for a long enough time for my family to get to know him and be comfortable about it. And that when I did say yes to that man, I understood what that meant. Were our ideals the same? Were our morals and our values the same? Because there were going to be some conditions that came down the pike, and we were going to need these things in place if this marriage was going to work. And so we did. We set on a relationship with God as the foundation. I'd done enough 4 steps to be able to see how, my set the ball rolling, what my part in these relationships had been, where I had made mistakes, right? Where I wanted to be different, where I wanted to show up and be present in my life as a daughter, as a sister. And we had a beautiful, beautiful start. We had 2 more kids. Savannah and John were born. Brenna was, the star of the show. I know he fell in love with her first. He adopted her when she was in 2nd grade, and things are going great. AA house, kitchen table, AA kitchen table. I'm doing the deal. He's doing the deal. Our life's getting big and great. And these kids are growing up in AA, in the middle of AA. And I got to about 15 years sober. I'm doing the commitments. I'm sponsoring. I'm being sponsored. I had a sponsor for 20 years that walked me through that psychic change. I got to become a woman of dignity and grace that I couldn't have even imagined for myself. I could show up for my parents in a way that I never would have believed possible. I wasn't welcome in their homes. I didn't have keys to their places, and all of a sudden I'm the medical person for them. I have the attorney's card. Josh talked about that. I'm it for them. They call me when they need advice. They called me when, they knew they could count on me. I hope I get a chance to tell some of those stories, but I think that this for me is when I did that 4-step and I learned that part of the forgiveness part of that. For me, it's been all about forgiveness, and I got to forgive the people that I had, held on to those things for so long. And then because I couldn't ask for forgiveness for myself if I wasn't going to give it to them. And I opened up all that space, right? All that space. And then God took 6 and 7 and turned me into what he needed me to be for those times in my life, those phases of development. And right now, the phase of development is being the sober Nona. I didn't have a sober grandmother. My kids did not have a sober grandmother. And if I don't keep coming to you all and I don't keep doing the steps and opening up that space for God to use me, I'm not a sober Nona. I'm just not. Can't believe that's my name because I'm not Italian and I don't cook. But she loves me. She adores me. So anyway, what happened is the ceiling fell at 15 years sober. I'm staying at home now with these 3 kids. After the 3rd kid was born, I got to stay home. One of the biggest gifts of my life and of sobriety. And I wake up one morning and I look at our 2 cell phones are sitting there on the dresser, and I don't know which one just got a text, and I pick it up, and it's a compromising text to my husband from another woman. And I just couldn't believe it. I would have told you on my son's life that would never have happened. And it was Valentine's Day the day before, and I got a card that said I was his everything and that I had roses and I had, you're the love of my life, and I never would have expected that. And I learned what happens when you don't treat your alcoholism and you get spiritually sick. You trade a lot of stuff in. And I'll tell you, at that moment, when I walked downstairs and I walked through my dining room, I had a spiritual experience. I don't know why I didn't want to go key someone's car. I don't know why I didn't want to throw his shit out on the lawn. I didn't know why. I just felt love for this man. And I almost was like I knew that there was no way he'd put his family on that table and trade that in if he wasn't sick. And I just believed that. And I chose that moment to forgive him. In that moment, that same day. I mean, I was freaking out. I was screaming. I was a mess. But I made that decision. And we went with that. And also at the same time, I turned 40. We got garnished by the IRS a couple times. We lost our printing company. We turned in 2 cars. We had to take our kids out of some private schools. Shit was hitting the fan, guys, big time. And I thank God that our foundation was built on what it was, right? God was in the center. The women carried me again. They carried my ass. I was dying. And I never felt closer to God than I'd ever in the whole time of my life to this day. I've held both of my parents when they took their last breath, and I still didn't feel as close as I did during that time, because I had nowhere else to go. nowhere else to go, because a drink or a drug wasn't going to fix it. So our house stayed in foreclosure for I don't know how many years, but we sat there every morning and every night, and we said, God, if you want us here, we're here. If you want us gone, we're gone. Just tell us what to do. And that's a hard way to live when you have 3 little kids, 2 black labs, and a business you're running out of your garage. I don't know what's going to happen. And so at that mark in my sobriety, that phase of my development, I had total reliance. And it's easy to say, oh, don't put anything between God or he'll take it. Well, when you put your money where your mouth is and you're turning in your cars, and I'm a little pouty. I'm saying, you know how many women I took to detox in that car? Do you know how many times I took that car to Baltimore and got that girl off the street and gave her a bath and took her to detox? I didn't put that before. Guess what? It wasn't about me. It wasn't about me. I think my sponsor said, you got to stay sober is what you got to do. So, there's some times where the rubber hits the road when you've been here a while, and it's a beautiful spiritual experience if you choose it to be. Or you can be, a sad ass, glad ass, or a sad ass. You can be a sad ass about it, and you can complain, and you can not see the good in it, but we used it. We used it to help others. We used it to get closer. Our marriage had never been better. We worked so hard to allow God to run the whole show. We pushed in more stakes. He was now going to run it all. He was going to run it all, and he was going to decide if this was going to work or not, and we were just going to show up every morning, and we were going to do it. And I know he'd agree. It was one of the best times we've had in 30 years together. It was simple. And so we get through this. He fell off a ladder, broke his pelvis, and his body was in a couple different directions, and that was the final straw. I looked up at God at the end of that, and I said, okay, what are you doing? What's going on here? And we got him back to health, and we just started a whole new phase of life, and it's been beautiful ever since. So we raised these kids in the middle of AA, and I like to share these stories. I want you guys to remember, they never saw their mom drunk, never saw their dad drunk. They could do stand-up comedy of what it was like living in that house with the sober people and their sober, crazy parents. But they knew they were loved. They knew that we would do anything for them, and I hope that, one day if one of them needs you guys, you'll be here. I think 1 out of 3. But Al-Anon gave a beautiful home to my oldest daughter. She found out that she falls in love with alcoholics. I knew something was wrong with her, but I didn't know what, because she wasn't an alcoholic. I didn't know that you could be born Al-Anon, but you can. And we've been able to learn what it's like to be parents of adult children. And I've been allowed to practice these principles in that part of my life and just let them be kids. And I get to just be the mom. I'm not the AA police. I'm not the relationship expert. I'm just the mom. And I've been able to be a sober mom because of you guys. So, we get through all of that, and our life is changing and growing in ways that only God can inspire. And, my mom gets sick, and I go down to South Carolina, and I bring this woman back, and for 4 months straight, I took care of my mom every day for 4 months and had a spiritual experience. I had a spiritual experience with that mom I hated, and she didn't like me much. And you all for 20 years, 25 years, kept removing the things that were blocking me from her. And by the time those 4 months came along, God's timing, we had a spiritual experience. And I got to hold her. And the example of that is my father was on the other side of the bed at one side, and I was on the other side. It was 2 people with her when she died. The 2 people she probably hurt the most in her life. My father had been remarried for 40 years, but that's who was there. We loved her at the last breath, and it was a beautiful experience. Anything's possible. My father just had this way of life without being an alcoholic. He just always knew the right thing, and he loved my mother. And we got to hold her when she took her last breath. The cool part about that story was she died in our living room, and there was a men's retreat that my husband puts on, and all these AA people came before they went into the retreat, and we had an AA party at our house, and she's in her deathbed in the hospital bed looking out onto the lawn of, 100 people out there, and these people, these AA heroes of mine, spent time at her bedside and got to talk with her and love on her and show her what we are, and she said, "Those friends of yours are amazing. They're great. And you guys showed up for my mom." And I took care of my dad, and he just died 3 years ago, and you guys gave him back his daughter, right? Through 8 and 9 and cleaning up all that stuff, I was able to be of maximum service to these people. I got to teach other women how to hold their parents when they died. I got to be there and show them how to do that. One of the biggest gifts I've gotten since I've been here is to be John's wife. And that's all of it, the good, the bad, all of it. I couldn't be in an intimate relationship if you had held a gun to my head, out there or in here, even sober. How do you do that? How do you become connected to another human being? But a woman fell in love with me, and then I fell in love with that woman who walked in the door, that couldn't look herself in the mirror. That intimate relationship from one soul to another soul. And that's what taught me, hey, if you can do it with that woman you don't even know, maybe this man who adores you, you could do that. And so my job today is to continue to remove that stuff that might block me from him, that might block me from the woman walking through the door. Because if that connection isn't open, I'm not going to be of maximum service. She's not going to sit down with me knee to knee and feel that spirit. You know it if you sit next to someone that's got it. And my job is to make sure it stays there, even when I'm afraid, even when it's inconvenient, even when I don't want to, When I get that call, I remember one time John and I were at a Mexican restaurant, and I got a call, a 12-step call, and I got to go to the hospital. I get really excited about that kind of stuff. And this woman had been getting something from the internet back when it first started, and I thought, it looked like she had rat poison in her body, and we had a long night in that emergency room, and I get her up to the floor, and next day I go to see her. And she said, all I remember is smelling Mexican food. I just kept smelling Mexican food. But, it's times when I have to get up out of that little romantic dinner and go do that and leave him there to go do that. Or when I'm cozy in bed and it's warm and there's a fire going and I get that call and I get to go. I get to remind myself I'm still willing to go to any lengths. When that home group that we just didn't feel, we just couldn't get that feeling, we created it. It's my responsibility. My recovery is my responsibility. My sponsor took my hand and put it in God's hand and always told me that she was never going to be enough, that no human power. And her job was to give me a power, help me find my power that was going to get me through any and all conditions. And thank God she did. Because think about some of that stuff I only got to touch the surface on this morning. She wasn't going to be able to fix that stuff. My parents couldn't have fixed that stuff. And a drink and a drug wasn't going to fix that stuff. My drug of choice is alcohol. It's just simple. And it's not an option today. So I have to choose love. I have to use kindness, patience. So I take care of my mother-in-law now. We moved her down a year and a half ago. She has Parkinson's and Parkinson's dementia. And we tried to keep her at home, and it didn't work out, and she's 8 miles away. And I'm there all day, every day. I used to get on the little bus when she was still able to go to the lunches on Friday and have our little field trips. We can't do that anymore. But I spread this love that AA gave me everywhere I go. I make beautiful friends there. And I'm telling you, I'm having a spiritual experience. Some people might say, this is really hard. I don't know how you do what you do. I know the other daughter-in-law, my sister-in-law is like, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how I couldn't do it. You all told me I have to show up. If God's going to show up in this part of my life, I have to be of maximum service. I can't not do it. and I get to tell her the same thing 100 times, and I get to do all the things that she needs me to do. I don't always get to pick and choose who he needs me to help. And right now, that's where I'm at. And I'm telling you right now, I had a choice. I could be a sad ass or a glad ass, and I'm choosing to have a spiritual experience. He's going to use this. He's using it right now. The only other one to share real quick is that when my mom died, my brother lives in Arizona, and I'm praying for the men in AA in Arizona to be there. I feel sometimes helpless that I can't wear the AA hat. He's too close. He's my brother. He's seen me sober. So to take an active role, I pray for the men in AA that if he ever shows up, that he'll be there. But anyway, he didn't come to help me. He didn't come to see his mom. She asked him to come and say goodbye, and he didn't come. And he didn't come help me close her house or sell her house or have the funeral. Didn't even come to the funeral. And then he didn't talk to me for 5 years. I learned there's something worse than hate, indifference. His indifference for me, another time where spiritually almost killed me, the sadness that had against me. And so I worked rounds of steps. I went to therapy over this. I didn't understand it. He wouldn't even tell me why he was upset. He wouldn't even talk to me. And I prayed, and I lit candles, and I went all these things. I did everything I could possibly do. And during that 5-year time, I sent the card every year, Love Renee. Even if he threw it in the trash, I was instructed to do this, to keep the door open if he ever wanted to come back. And I was at an AA meeting, and I looked around one night, and I had done all this work, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. This is how God kind of shows up in my life. I looked out, and I saw a room like this with all the men that God had sent me to be my brother. And there were men in that AA meeting that had been my brother for 25 years that would be there for me for anything. And I got okay with it. And then about a year later, when my dad was dying, my brother came back into my life. We've never even had a conversation about that. I didn't need to. I didn't need to prove or tell him anything about how he made me feel. I just got a chance to love him and bring him back into my life. And that's the choices that I get when I'm sober. There's nothing to even talk about. I just love him, and I love that he's my brother, and I'm here for him. And that's been another spiritual experience. And that's what life can be here, a big, huge spiritual experience. But you have to look, and you have to keep that channel open is what I was taught. And so that's my job. My job is to keep that open, wait and see what he needs me to do for him today. And I hope, I've got to I got to go to the relationship panel yesterday, and I got to listen to Josh and talk to some of you so far, and I hope that we'll have a chance to get to know each other this weekend. And, like my husband was right. He said, you guys are our people. He gets to do a lot of this, and he said there's some special people at that rally, and he was right. And I thank you so much for letting me to participate. Thank you.
Wow. That was outstanding. What a message of hope. And I really appreciate it, and I know y'all do too. Isn't God in our program wonderful? He is so good all the time.